we'll move on to our next speaker, which we're delighted to have here, which is Seán Foghlú, who's the Secretary General of the Department of Education, and we're really delighted to have Seán here. In terms of his introduction, I went to the department's website to see what your job description was, Seán, and it says the Secretary General is responsible for the effective and efficient management of the department, including particular financial responsibilities, providing advice to ministers, delivering outputs and outcomes, addressing cross-cutting matters, and being accountable before Oireachtas committees as required. So I think we're really lucky to have that connection with National Parents' Council, and I suppose, you know, there's a lot of backwards and forwards between ourselves and the department. We have some really good relationships with people in the staff of Seán's in the department, particularly Tom Deegan here, who's responsible for the sector that we fall under in terms of responsibilities. And I think it's really important that those relationships are good. When the department has so much influence on the policy that affects how schools operate, we would value very much that relationship, and we're always very pleased that the department would see partnership with parents as very high on their agenda, and the fact that we would meet them regularly and exchange our views with the department is really important to us. So I'd like to welcome Seán. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anya. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I think this is my third time speaking to this conference. It's a delight to be here. Just going to start really by thanking Anya for her work in leading your organisation over many years, and in being a really strong advocate for parents. I'm going to come back to that later on in what I'm talking about in the manner in which you're successful in doing that, and we hope that you'll continue to be successful in engaging in that regard. And also, I know that he can't be here, but you've a new chair in Larry Keaveney, so to welcome him to his new role. And again, a very strategic decision and approach in the manner in which you engage external chairs to your work. Unfortunately, the Minister's not able to be here, Minister McHugh. It tends to be slightly easier on a Saturday session to get the ministers when they're based in Dublin. So I know that you've had Richard Bruton here the last couple of years, but it just hasn't been possible for Minister McHugh to make his way. But he was discussing with me the approach that I take to talking with you this morning or this afternoon now, and he's very strong on the student and parent charter, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, and he's really looking forward to engaging with you and continuing to engage with you. Well, one of the overall approach of the department has to be set out in our annual action plan and in our 3-year strategies. And one of the things we have to do when a new minister is appointed is to have a new strategy. And we have a new strategy which we adopted in March, which is called Comasu, which is the Irish word for empowerment. And it's about empowerment of everybody through learning. And that, I think, is the underpinning philosophy to enable everyone to realise their potential to the greatest extent possible that we're trying to undertake. We are seeking to set out goals for ourselves and indeed for the education and training sector as a whole in our strategy, and we are publishing action plans on an annual basis of the actions we plan to take. They're not all the actions the department takes, but it's trying to find a way to communicate what actions we're trying to take, what the main actions are, what our objectives are, and how we measure against them. And we're publishing quarterly reports on what we're doing, and we're publishing an annual report. So we have 5 key goals to what we're trying to do, but I'm not going to set those all out because you can all access them if you want. But I think just to talk about a couple of them, we're aiming to shape a responsive education and training system that meets the needs and raises the aspirations of all learners. We are seeking to advance the progress of learners at risk of educational disadvantage and learners with special education needs in order to support them and to achieve their potential. And we are seeking to intensify relationships between the education and the wider community, the education sector and the wider community, society and the economy. And within that, there are particular strategic actions in relation to engagement with parents. And I think that's very, very important in terms of our engagement with you today. In particular, in actions for 2019, we have a really important and key action, which I know the National Parents Council is really interested in, which is our commitment to publish the Education Student and Parent Charter Bill. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Part of that will include the introduction of a stronger complaints procedure and a charter for parents and students, which is also another action there, and making progress on diversity of school type in order to give parents more choice, and consulting with stakeholders on the regulations under the Admissions to Schools Act, which we're in the process of doing, and also consulting with stakeholders on revising the governance manual for primary schools for the change of the boards of management that's happening this year. So all of those are very relevant to, I think, parents. Doesn't capture all of the areas of parental engagement, but I think it captures the extent to which parents are embedded in our strategic thinking and embedded in the actions that we're seeking to take. I want to give a couple of examples really of areas where parental input is really impacting on the way we're doing our business. And you've got to remember the department has a lot of different activities. One of the key areas where we have work is in relation to inspections. And I know the Chief Inspector, Harold Hislop, would have spoken at this conference previously as well. We have changed the format of our inspection reports to make them more as accessible to parents as possible. And each report now describes the inspection model and what inspectors do during inspection. And the inspector will continue to work on further ways of engaging with parents before and after and during inspections in the coming year, and will be engaging with Anya and the team on that. Particularly important in this regard, and this is, I think, one of the areas where there has been particular work in recent regards. We have been developing an overall child protection and safeguarding policy and implementation model, and particularly as part of that, we've been looking at the inspection model for that, and the NPC. I just want to acknowledge the role that you've had in looking at that. And there are so many different ways that you've managed to help to engage in those areas to make us be able to ensure that our policies and approaches are as effective as possible in engaging parents. And I think, as the research has shown today, it's not just engaging parents, but having an understanding of the impact of that engagement. I think that's really important. A key new initiative that we've taken this year that we are now involving the NPC in is in relation to the extent to which there are a range of different changes impacting on the primary schooling system. And one of the key messages that we've got from all stakeholders, including the NPC, is we need to have a collective look at the sequencing of change, and that change, there are quite a few different initiatives coming from the department, the vast majority of which there's a lot of support for, but that we need to get better as a department in joining them up and ensuring that they support each other and that they're introduced in an implementable way. So we've established a primary education forum. We tried it initially with really the teacher groups and the management groups. We're broadening it now to involve parents groups and the NPC and other stakeholders. And one of the things we're trying to do is just look at that issue of the sequencing of change. We're also looking at how change impacts on different types of schools, and we're later on this month having a symposium on small schools and looking at how change impacts differently on small schools and seeing if there are any initiatives and ideas that we can look at in that regard. And I know there are different stakeholders here who are seeking to engage with us on that. And I think we're hoping, arising from that engagement, to have some different ideas about how we can engage with small schools and maybe how small schools might be able to collaborate with each other in that regard. And the Minister is very, very keen on this, just to say that he's very conscious of the importance of small schools in their communities, and he's very conscious of ensuring that those schools can work together to the greatest extent possible. So I think that's part of what we're trying to do. And as I said before, the department and myself as Secretary General, but also the Minister, are very committed to the Student and Parent Charter Bill. This is going to be the first time that we'll have principles to guide how schools engage with students and their parents. We hope to, through this in legislation, place the student at the centre of school life. Obviously, they'll reflect hugely the important role that parents play as the primary educators of children. So we're really trying through this legislation to support parents and schools in working in partnership to ensure the best possible outcomes for their students. Now, legislation doesn't achieve that. You know, I think we all know you could pass all the laws in the world. It's actually about practice on the ground. So what we're trying to do, coming back to our theme of empowering through learning, is to have the legislation to be empowering to support the various partners at national level and at school level to engage with each other. We know from inspections and so on, and from research that we've heard today, that schools do this in different ways, and within schools there are different practices. Many schools do it well, and we really need to build up sort of practice on those so as other schools can learn from that. And again, the NPC has been very active in that regard. The legislation has gone through pre-legislative scrutiny, so everybody has a good idea what's in it. The drafting is underway. We really hope to publish in the near future, and then that will require this parent and student charter to be in place. And I think really important, a really important aspect of this is that there are going to be guidelines. We envisage there to be guidelines under this, and that we will consult in a real and detailed way with the stakeholders on the guidelines, and that's going to be really important in ensuring that they achieve the objective in as straightforward a way as possible. So there's going to be a number of different aspects to this that we're going to have to work through, and we just have to be careful we don't claim that legislation changes everything, but it's legislation is, I think, supporting the direction of change that's there underway, will confirm it, and will mean that by schools having these charters, parents have a formal way with which to engage, but obviously it'll be in a way that hopefully will involve all of the school communities with coming together in the best way possible. Just want to move on to a few other topics. One of the things I think that the Parents' Council has done very well is, you know, advance its representative role, and I think we as a sector are very practiced in this sort of partnership approach. I'm not saying we do it brilliantly on every single aspect of what we do, but we are. I think that the modus operandi is to seek to engage with stakeholders as we do our business, and within that, to make sure that we seek to engage with the stakeholders in different ways. Parents are a really important voice on that. I think students in schools are a really important voice in that, and this new charter will enhance that at national level and at school level. And I think increasingly we're going to also see the voice of students in primary schools as an important voice. And I think that's something that is probably not something that's just beginning to be talked about, but I think there have to be ways to engage with that. The Department of Children and Youth Affairs has proven very good in coming at different ways of engaging with children, as indeed I think the Ombudsman for Children has been as well, and you know, trying new ways of engaging with children, and hopefully we can all learn from that. And that's why it's great, I think, particularly the move of the Parents' Council Primary into giving a voice in early years education has been really important, and it's great to see the engagement outside on the stand about the new implementation of the new models in early years and information being here. So the NPC as a partner is really important. Your involvement on the board of the NCCA, the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, and not just the board, because it's about the committees and all the work there, and also the committees on the Teaching Council. I know Tomas is here. The work on the child protection guidelines that I've talked about, the work that you've had over recent years on the anti-bullying procedures, and that's been really important about, and the various different aspects of all those are really, your voice is getting heard, and you are there to challenge us. It's not always an easy debate, but I think it's a debate where around the table people do listen to each other and change positions, and positions of organisations, including ourselves, including yourselves, and including the various school bodies, do change over time. One initiative which I know, I think it was the last time I was here, I heard about, is the Partnership Schools Ireland initiative, I think, and that really is going from strength to strength, and I want to commend yourselves and indeed Pádraig in the IPPN for your work in that regard. The 3-year pilot made available this research-based methodology that built upon this involvement of teachers and parents and pupils all together in a collective way, and now we've all agreed to continue the programme and expand, and I think that's really important. And that way in which you're really effectively have active research happening in parallel to inform the policy approaches. And we've had another really good example today, and thanks to Leah and Joan, that was really interesting. And indeed, quite clear a collaboration between led by Marino, but with a number of other universities and colleges. That's really, really great. So you're bringing together the different thinkers in the area. But I think the role of the National Parents Council primary in bringing those voices together to try and get the experts to be reflecting on those issues. In a sense, there are directions of travel arising from that, but there are no easy answers on the sorts of issues. But it's really, really great to see it. And that cooperation and bringing that voice is really, really important. And I think part of the next step in this is really bringing the voice of parental engagement into teacher education, into initial teacher education, and potentially into teacher CPD. And that's not going to be done by edict. That's going to be done by, I think, the awareness of the academics we've had here and their engagement, and knowing that link needs to take place, because I think everybody is open to the concepts, but people all have to be reminded of the new and emerging practice. Schools today are very different than they were 20 years ago. They're very different than they were 30 years ago. Unfortunately, sometimes people just think because they're the same units that the same thing is happening, but actually the learning and the engagement is just so different. And I get reminded so much of that when I hear research like we heard today. As a department, we really support the work of the NPC primary, and I think the cultural change direction that at a highest level you're seeking to achieve. We give you, I suppose, I think it's about 2/3 of your funding to do that, but that's supportive funding. We aren't seeking to obviously control your actions, and that means that you raise issues with us that we have to address, and sometimes likewise, and some of it is in a block grant, and some of it is to support the partnership initiative, and others of it is to support training and so on. So there's a number of different areas, and we think that you're a very strong organisation, and we want to work with you to do that. I still think there's a big journey to travel in parental engagement. I think we're still in the foothills of it. I think education will look very different. Schooling will look very different in 20 years' time. The learning for primary children will look very different in 20 years' time. And there are so many different dimensions to it. And I think the Parents' Council, through your research work and through your engagement in policy, has a really big opportunity to impact on that. And we'll certainly look forward to working with you in that regard. So I've tried to just give a brief overview of where we're at in terms of the role of parents and the role of the NPC. And we really, really are open to that engagement, and you're really, really important. And just to thank everybody who's here, giving up their Saturdays again for that engagement. But you're a big movement. You're reflected across the country. But it's great that so many of you are here today, and it's great that so many of you and your colleagues are involved in this work with the NPC primary. So thank you very much.